Joining me now, trial attorney and legal analyst Misty Marris, to talk about the significance of this case, the gravity of this case, and the chilling testimony that's happening so far. Misty, prosecutors do have a difficult job here, one, because something like this has never been tried. What is their biggest obstacle in convincing a jury of these parents' negligence?
Yeah, Marnie, this is a very novel legal theory to hold the parents responsible for the acts of their child in this mass shooting. And we've seen parents charged in relation to their children being having access to guns and other issues like that. However, those charges have manifest as reckless endangerment charges. They've manifest as child neglect charges, and those charges do not hold the parents responsible for the actual deaths. In this case, it is holding the parents responsible for the deaths of those 4 victims in this school shooting. The biggest obstacles for the prosecution breaks down to 2 of the critical legal elements in the case. 1, were Ethan Crumbley's actions foreseeable? Prosecutors say they were foreseeable. They go through a litany of things that had happened, his mental state, what they believe his mother and father were aware of. That's what the prosecution is presenting. The defense, on the other hand, says it was not foreseeable. Much of what Ethan was sharing with friends and saying she was not privy to. It was not foreseeable that he would go and shoot the school. So that's one challenge. The other challenge is what's called causation, meaning were Jennifer Crumbley's actions the cause of the deaths of these individuals, the cause of Ethan's action? The defense will argue that there was what's called an intervening factor, and that is Ethan Crumbley's autonomous actions. And I think they're going to point to what he said during his sentencing, that his parents were not aware. It is important to point out the prosecution is not making the case that Ethan shared his plans with his parents, that his parents were aware of the planning specifically, just that they were aware of circumstances where they should have known that he was a danger, he posed a risk, and that they failed to act on that knowledge.
What about those text messages? And now we're talking about the evidence in the case between Jennifer Crumbley and her son, Ethan. You know, she was basically saying, did you do this? You should hide things better when he took bullets to school. How might that play into this case?
It's absolutely going to play into what she knew or should have known prior to the shooting. That's the critical time period. But her response in those text messages in the wake of the shooting, the immediate Ethan, don't do it. All those messages where she is worried that her son is in fact the school shooter would lead someone to believe that she had knowledge that he had the capacity to do something like this prior to the shooting being done, and that she failed to act on that knowledge. Now, on the flip side, there are some text messages from the day. So we're looking at, there's a lot of eyes on the day of the shooting. So there's text messages that are prior to the incident, and there's text messages that are after. And the messages that are prior, I expect the defense to focus in on some of those where there's concern regarding this drawing that's going to be very, very central to the case. But there's also, I'm going to bring Ethan to the horse farm next week, and a lot of text messages that would indicate that she did not know what was to come. Now, flipping that on its head, I think these text messages cut both ways because they're very, very damaging with respect to messages that were shared after the shooting occurred and when she became aware that a shooting was ongoing and immediately thought Ethan is involved. So that's going to be a real problem for the defense. Still, those arguments exist, and the prosecution does have hurdles with respect to proving that she is responsible for those deaths.
How about the actions, Misty, after the shooting? So the defense in opening statement said Mom was in shock. She could not believe that her son had carried out this horrific crime. And so her mental state was not a normal one, as no one would be. But the prosecution will say they ran. They drained their son's bank account. They hid from police because they knew what was about to happen. How will these 2 arguments collide? They drained their son's bank account. They hid from police because they knew what was about to happen. How will these 2 arguments collide in court?
So a great question, and a lot of what the prosecution is pointing to really relates to that the the mental state. And again, in this case, there's no argument that this was something intentional on behalf of Jennifer Crumbley, but it's all about what she knew or should have known before and whether or not she ignored a risk. So what they're saying is that their actions after the fact indicate guilt because they hid out. They went to an art gallery. They stayed. They were not home. They took money. Did they have the intention of running further? Why would you do that if there was no indication that something was wrong or that there was some sense of responsibility? Of course, the defense on the flip side trying to justify those actions and say, well, look, their child just shot 4 people that are killed. This is a tragedy. And they're simply reacting to that. So both of those narratives are going to play out. But any time that you have somebody who runs, there's always going to be that question of whether or not that means something for their mental state prior to the act occurring. Marnie, I do want to flag something because there's something in the opening statements that I think is going to be to watch as this trial unfolds. In the preliminary hearings, we had heard that the school counselors, and this again was in the prosecutor's opening statements today too, the school counselors, when they called the Crumbleys in, just, very, very shortly before the shooting occurred, they presented this very, very disturbing drawing, and they asked the Crumbleys to bring Ethan home and get him mental health treatment immediately. The defense in their opening is saying that that is not the case, that in fact the counselor said this isn't indicative of anything further, but you should make sure that you get mental health counseling, but he can stay in school. So those are 2 completely different narratives, and that's going to be a key factor. And we should watch for evidence as this case unfolds relating to that meeting because it is so close in time to this tragic event.
Wow, interesting. 2 very different accounts of how that meeting went, and perhaps that counselor will be part of testimony, witness testimony. Misty, thank you.